Welcome to the Funny Carpenter. Today, after a lifetime, that was annoying. I'm annoying myself. Take 74. Welcome to the Funny Carpenter. Today, after a lifetime of measuring things, I'm excited to offer you my top 5 tips to instantly improve your tape measure ability. Tip number 1, get yourself a quality tape measure. Nobody's going to the major leagues and hitting a lot of moon rockets with this limp biscuit. I don't know how many times I've been over at a buddy's house helping him do something. And I'm like, hey, you got a tape measure? And he hands you one of these beauties. And you're like, dude, what is going on with your tape measure? Get yourself a quality tape measure. The 16-foot Stanley Fat Max tape, in my opinion, is the best tape. So if you're not going to go ahead and just get yourself a Stanley Fat Max, there's a couple things that you want to look for in a tape measure. There's a lot of good tape measures out on the market. The first thing that I always look for is, does the tape measure measure the same when it's butted in and hooked onto something? Now you can test this by just hooking onto something, make a pencil line, put a board up against the same point, butt into it, and see if it reads the exact same. That has to do with the amount of play in the end here. So you want to make sure that that's squared away, because that can throw you off in a lot of circumstances. The next thing that I always consider with a tape measure is, does it have good standout? So the Stanley Fat Max is not the best in the industry, but for a 16-foot tape, it'll stand out easily, comfortably to 9 feet. It goes to, I think, 10.5. 10.5 is about the maximum, which is plenty of standout. If you get yourself into a cheap tape, they usually stand out about, you know, maybe 6 or 7 feet. So that just makes a difference. Easier to use in certain circumstances when you need to reach the tape out. It comes in handy to have the extra standout. The Milwaukee tapes, the new Milwaukee tapes, have great standout as well. The next thing that I always look at is, how easy is it to read the tape measure? Your stud spacing indicators, and you can read the tape. The most important thing to me is you can read the tape from both sides. You can measure and make marks on both sides. You get into some of these tapes, some of them have little cheater bits on here. Sometimes at the beginning of the tape, they have 30-second markings on there. I don't like any of that stuff. Some tapes will have metric and imperial on one side. Go one or the other. You want to be able to make marks and read measurements from both sides of the tape. And the last thing that you really want to consider when getting a tape measure is, where are you going to store the tape measure when you're working? Do you have a tool belt? Does it fit nicely into the pouches? I have this little clip-on pencil holder type situation, and the Stanley just clips on and off seamlessly, right? I can just, if I need to measure something, I just, boom, my hand's already grabbing the tape measure, and I just clip it back on. The new Milwaukee tapes are pretty sweet as well, but the little clip on the back doesn't work at all with this little leather pouch. It doesn't want to clip on there, so I like the Milwaukee tape, but for that reason, I just stick with the Stanley. Tip number 2, learn how to throw your tape. Not that kind of throwing. You want to learn how to throw just the end of your tape measure. Not only does it look super cool, but it's highly practical and it can save you a ton of time. Look at these 2 scenarios. I'm marking out this piece of casing. I could either A, walk down towards the end, hook on, come on back, make my mark. B, the throwing option. You just take the end of the tape and you throw it to where you want to hook on, come down here, make your mark. You've saved 3 or 4 seconds, and if you're trimming out an entire house, I mean, you're talking like 10 minutes a day by just throwing your tape. It works for measuring. Say I want to measure how far is it from here to the garage door. Well, I'm not going to sit there and slowly wind my tape out and then come back, grab the tape measure, throw it over there, give it one little push. There you go, 10 feet away. Interesting. So the key to a good tape measure toss is, grab onto the end with 2 fingers, and what you want to do is get the thing sliding out before you let go of it. So it's sliding, and then you just let go. It's not a quick little toss. You grab onto the end, get it sliding out with some speed. And yeah, you can toss it out usually about 6.5 feet. And because this tip was slightly silly, I'll throw in one little bonus item here. It's not part of the 5 tips. This is a bonus. This goes on how do you make your mark with the tape measure to get super accurate cutting. So what you want to do is hook onto the end of your piece. Now let's say you're trying to mark 70 inches. A lot of people just go in the middle and they mark the line, and then you have no way of really cutting it exactly 70 inches. So what you want to do, you're marking the 70, you start off a little to the left of 70, and then you just work your way towards the 70, and you don't pencil past the 70. So when you're going to make your cut, you're going to cut off the entire pencil line, and you'll be left with exactly 70 inches. Tip number 3. This is a super simple tip that has a bunch of variations for lots of circumstances. I use it primarily for 2 things: to find center of the room and to get a super accurate inside measurement reading. So to find the center, what I like to do is I just estimate roughly where the center is. I'll make a mark at 56, because I think that's pretty much where center is. And then I'll come the other way and I'll mark 56. So I was off a little bit. Now what you want to do is measure in between these 2 marks. So I have 1 3/8. Divide that by 2. It's 11/16. There's your center. It's super effective for a big room, and it's actually a lot easier. I just pretty much use that process all the time, rather than measuring the whole distance, dividing that by 2, then you measure again. This way I find is a little quicker and the math is a little simpler. Now what this little process also allows you to do is get a super accurate measurement in between here, which would be good for baseboards, crown molding, or just knowing exactly how big something is. So in order to do that, you'd come across, and what you'd want to do is you'd probably want to go to like a nice number, like a 60 or a 50 or a 70, wherever it's kind of comfortable. You don't want to go too far because then the tape might fall down. So I'd come to 60, and you make a mark right up to the 60. So then you come the other way, and you measure, so it's 53 3/8. So you add 60, 113 3/8 is the overall width of this room. Yeah, so if I'm doing baseboard or crown molding, I'll oftentimes use that technique. It's a lot more accurate than measuring the whole distance and then trying to read the little curve. Oftentimes too, depending on the circumstance, I will just come to one end, mark off 10 inches, then measure the other way, and then just add 10 inches. And if you've been noticing the pencil that I've been using here, this is the finest pencil that I've ever used. I'll put a link in the description on Amazon. I buy 12 packs off these in Amazon. This is the Staedtler Mars Lumograph number B. I'll also put a link for these awesome little eraser tips because it's a great combination. Yeah, these are just simply the best pencils. They run about $1.50-ish a piece Canadian. The lead is just, it's amazing. You can sharpen it to a super fine point. The B lead is slightly softer, so you're gonna get a nice dark line on whatever you're marking. And the softer lead also marks pre-finished material. If you have a harder pencil, it's not gonna wanna put a mark onto like a pre-finished cabinet piece. Do me a favor and order yourself a pack of these. And tip number 4. This is a little tip that will make a world of difference for cutting baseboards. You can use it for other things, but I primarily use it for baseboards, and this is it. So if you were going to cut a baseboard for this little section right here, you can go ahead and measure that. It's 9 3/16, and you could mark the back of the baseboard and you could cut it that way. Number one, it's difficult to cut things when the mark is on the back of the material. You can cut the material upside down, but it will chip the face out. So you want to cut it the proper way on your saw. So what I like to do is, so I'm cutting this here. What I want to do is get a measurement to the outside point of the baseboard. So I go ahead and cut 2 little scrap pieces of whatever the material is. I use this all the time for furniture kit, finish grade. So you cut your 2 scraps, just put them to the point where you're going to be measuring, take your measurement 10 3/16. So now you know it's 10 3/16 from one edge to the other edge. You go ahead and make those marks on your piece. And it's way easier to cut through the face of the material. I like to cut all my stuff laying down. So I'll lay that down on the miter saw and I'll cut. I will see the mark, and if I need to adjust it, I'll slide the piece over, and it's way simpler. I don't know why, I spent a long time actually just measuring the wall as is, making the marks on the back. I used to cut a lot of stuff standing up, so you'd look over the saw and okay, you're getting closer. This way is way more accurate and 10 times simpler. You can also use this tip, say if you're measuring an inside corner where it's going to be mitered and mitered on each side, you stack these two little thicknesses in there, and then you measure your width, and what that will give you is the measurement to the inside face of each of the pieces. It makes it a lot easier for cutting as well. Yeah, this is a handy little tip. It's the only way that I measure baseboards is with the little block. Now, this is definitely one of the best tips I have, except for this last one, which brings us to tip number 5. This is it, my final tip. Now this is not for plumbers or electricians. This is for woodworkers, finishing carpenters, cabinet installers, and the homeowner that's trying to do a nice job at their house. So you're measuring something. Take this piece of wood, for example. Throw the tape on there. It's not 19 inches. It's not 19 1/16. You need a system that covers the in-between. So what I like to do, if I need a measurement, I've measured it, it's not 19, it's not 19 1/16, it's 19 plus. Now what that tells me is when I go to mark something, I mark it halfway in between. And if you want to get even more accurate and measure to the 64th, what I would do is say it's just about to the 16th, but not quite. Then I would write down 19 plus, and then I would circle it. And then when I go to transcribe the mark onto something else, that tells me exactly how long something is. Yeah, so when you're dealing with like stain grained wood or something, there's no amount of depth that's gonna save you. You have to measure at least to the 32nd, preferably the 64th. If you're working in millimeters, you can get away with a 1/2 millimeter. So you're just using the plus to add on that little bit when things don't quite measure exactly on the line. Yeah, so I'll use this system anytime I'm measuring something, writing it down, and then marking out a piece to cut. And if you want to take your measuring game to even new heights, check out my review of the Leica Dista D2 measuring device up here. Give this guy a punch in the face down here to subscribe. And if you got any of your own tips on measuring, put them in the comments. If I get enough of them, I'll make another video where I steal all of your ideas. Just joking, I will give you the credit. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.